In this 25th anniversary year of September 11th, the Tunnel to Towers Foundation continues to honor America's heroes. Heroes like Fire Lieutenant Michael Wells, who was inspired by 9/11 to serve his community. After 14 dedicated years of service, he lost his battle with occupational cancer, leaving behind his wife, Katie, and their 3 children. Tunnel to Towers honored Lieutenant Wells by paying off the family's mortgage in recognition of his sacrifices. Donate $11 monthly and amplify your impact with a car or land donation. Go to T2T.org.
Listen, all you New Yorkers. Excuse me, taxi.
Okay, man, we're looking around.
This is the 77 WABC minicast.
Dave Scott, lost in space, the other side of midnight.
Danger, Balthus Sterling, danger.
Dave Scott, a known Canadian, who is guilty of exposing many stories on UFOs, conspiracy theories, all the information about time travel, portals, everything that we need to know about our universe, our space. Dave Scott, welcome to the other side of midnight.
Thank you to the top host on the nighttime shift. I always appreciate sharing airtime with you.
Now, I want you to listen for a moment to an inspirational nighttime host. Just take a listen.
The Big Daddy digging the golden sounds from out of the past for you. And while we're in the Groove Yard, I want to remind you, if you dig the gold, we play every night at 1:15. You check in with Scott, so it's 7:15.
He's an all-American.
And he's loaded with gold.
On 77 WABC.
Time slide working, die variable people for it's who set for the past. 1960 gold we're going to play. It comes from the Imperials in Little A.
That was a part-timer. He was a part-timer on WABC as a rock station, doing overnights like part-time. Can you imagine what the daytime people sounded like? He was amazing. How are you, Dave?
I am great. I would love to hear more of that show, to be blunt.
All right, here's how you hear more. You ready? I'm not going to play it on the air because there are many radio stations on the Red Apple audio networks that would have very little interest in me playing WABC air checks. In fact, anybody under the age of 90 would have very little interest, but sometimes I get to indulge. All right, it's under 77 WABC. The date is February 7th, 1964. That's Bob Lewis, and it's on YouTube. 77 WABC. February 7th, 1964, that's Bob Lewis. He was just a world-class great disc jockey, and when progressive rock came along, he decided to do that. And he became a really hardcore progressive rock disc jockey with the very long pauses and the doors slamming in the background and the whole thing. And then, it's interesting, to do pace radio, what he was doing was pace radio. To do it that well is a skill, and you have to do it all the time. And then he started doing this very slow progressive rock thing, with the angels coming down. And a station I worked with hired him after he was not doing that anymore to come on and do weekends as a top 40 jock, to play oldies and be a top 40 jock again, and he couldn't do it. He absolutely, it sounded terrible. He apologized. He said, I just haven't done pace radio in a long time. I forgot how to do it. Isn't that amazing? Whereas you could do it because it would buy food.
Well, you know what? I don't know if my mind works that quickly as those DJs back in the day did.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I could do it, but it is a talent, and a lost talent, too.
Yeah, mostly, yes.
Right on the satellite, exactly 14 and a half after the witching hour, 1 WABC Golden Chime Time. The sound of the super hits, the sound of the solid gold from the gold mine in the Groove Yard. Babalu, the Big Daddy digging the golden sounds from out of the past for you. And while we're in the Groove Yard, I want to remind you, if you dig the gold, we play every night at 1:15. You check in with Scott, so it's 7:15.
He's an all-American.
And he's loaded with gold.
On 77 WABC.
Time slide working, die variable people for it's who set for the past. 1960 gold we're going to play. It comes from the Imperials in Little A.
It's amazing. I mean, it really is freaking amazing. And he made it sound so easy. All those guys made it sound so easy. There was a trick they all did, which I do, but they all did incredibly well. If you listen to their shows, the Cousin Bruceys, all of them, over half of the show was a rundown of the names of kids in high schools. It was a rundown of the names of the listeners to the show. It was the dominant element in those shows. They named who was listening. They put up a mirror to that audience. If you were a kid in high school and your name was on the big Top 40 station the night before, you were a star for a week after that. It was brilliant. It's how they got to be so big. The kids did the work.
Yeah, and you know what? All those times when Sam or Jessica requesting this song, that was huge back in the day of high school.
Huge.
Did you hear the DJ mention my name on Friday night at about 11 o'clock? Oh, man, that was the day.
They talked about our school. That's how they got to be big. That is how they got to be big. And there is Dave Scott. Now, I talked on the air earlier tonight about why I think these people are disappearing. The 12 people relative to ancient aliens, UFOs, UFO science, all of it. I said, another one killed himself. The blonde guy on Ancient Aliens, whose name I should remember, he killed himself. And
David Wilcock, yes.
David Wilcox, who seemed sane. Like, of all of those guys, he seemed the most sane. And the police came to his house. He was having a mental problem, they said. He was screaming about money and about people following him and the whole thing. And then he had a gun and he killed himself. What a horrible way to die, because here was a guy who was respected. He wrote many New York Times bestsellers. He was respected in the field. He knew what he was talking about. He didn't come off as a whack job, and he killed himself.
Yeah, he was, in the later part of his career, he was turning very controversial in supporting a gentleman named Corey Goode, who claimed to be part of a 20 and back UFO program called Super Soldiers that was proven in court to be a false testimony of his story. And him and David Wilcock worked very closely together for a long period of time. And a lot of people in the community kind of pulled away from both of them because they felt that the message of UFOs and ET contact was being framed into basically taking money from people. That we were getting all of these sources, all of these messages from the aliens above, and it turned it into, what a lot of people called two of the biggest grifters in the community. And eventually, Corey Goode took people to court over certain aspects of his story, and he even admitted in court, in his own defense, that he made it up. He made it all up. And that made David Wilcock look pretty bad, and eventually he ended up losing a lot of followers over this. And over time, he seemed to be going down a darker and darker road, according to people that were close to him, that because he had lost so many subscribers, lost positions in speaking engagements, and nobody wanted to read his books anymore, he lost a program that was highly popular on Gaia television, that eventually he just could not afford his lifestyle. He invested $5 million into some sort of fledgling military-type development company that ended up looking more like a Ponzi scheme than an actual, military contractor that it was building up to build small craft. And he lost almost his entire savings on that as well. So over time, mental illness in this field sometimes kicks in a little too heavily, and unfortunately, he decided to take the wrong way out.
It's very sad. Why haven't you done that? Why are you so happy and secure? Because you're steeped in this all the time.
I can tell you point blank that I also am diagnosed as suffering from depression and anxiety as well. I am not on medication for it because I have trained my body and I have trained my mind that I get to end every night on a happy note. No matter how terrible my day was, I get to end on a happy note surrounded by people that absolutely adore me, and I love them back, which are my listeners when I do Spaced Out Radio, and then I get to come on the air and share time with you on WABC and other stations around that we are broadcasting on, and it just makes me it puts me in a mental euphoria that I am in my element here. I'm in my safe zone, and it helps me get a better sleep at night. It helps me relax my mind. So I don't think some people have that ability. I'm lucky enough to have that.
Dave Scott, host of Spaced Out Radio. He's got a great channel on YouTube, which is called, you ready? I don't know if you can handle this. It's called Spaced Out Radio on YouTube. You can hear every show that he's ever done. He's a good friend of ours. What news have you tonight, Dave Scott?
Well, we were talking about a lot of the astronauts recently with Artemis 2, and there was an interesting story because the astronauts actually were honored today at the White House in front of President Trump, and there was a couple of weird aspects about this. Number one, they allowed the media into the Oval Office, and they barely asked the president or the astronauts about anything. They kept on grilling the president about Iran, about food prices, gas prices, you name it. It was everything but the astronauts. And here the astronauts are standing behind the president thinking, and you could read their faces, literally kind of thinking like, really? You know, this is supposed to be an event for us, but here you are talking about everything else but us. And I don't take that as an ego thing. I take that as the media played that one wrong, and I really strongly believe if I was the president, I'd be pretty upset with my PR person about that right now, because it was about honoring these heroes who just got back from circling the moon. But the other interesting part during that press conference, Walter, was the fact that the UFO question was brought up in front of the astronauts, and President Trump answered that in his first term, he had met with very handsome pilots. You remember that speech from about...
Yes, I remember his curious description of the pilots as being handsome.
Yeah, they were handsome, very
handsome
good-looking pilots.
Right.
We have the best-looking pilots in the world.
Yes.
And he brought that up about how they had seen some very strange things that were seemingly unknown. And the astronauts, while the president is talking about this, is only about a 14-second clip, but you can actually see them kind of look at each other and just kind of like button up their mouths. And it made me wonder what they may have seen. What were they holding back on that they are probably not allowed to talk to, because NASA is very strict and controlling in the media area of what their astronauts can and cannot say. And look, these people, they would like to go up again. They probably want to be part of the future cruise that walks back on the moon. And it made me start to think about certain astronauts that actually have had things encountered while in space. And I brought up a few, if you don't mind.
I don't mind, and I want you to bring them up, coming up in just seconds. But it's always been very strange that the president, after saying he's going to release it, has never actually given us any more details about how that's going to happen. 800-848-9222. You and I are talking to Dave Scott, a Canadian who's an expert on UFOs, portals, time travel, all of the things that we actually care about. Dave Scott, welcome to the big radio show at the Red Apple Audio Networks. Thank you, Mr. Scott, for joining us, because it's always good when you're on. Now, we were starting to talk about why are these people disappearing? Why have 12 people related to this expertise? Why have they disappeared? I don't know what's wrong there. Why have they disappeared? And today there was a bizarre press conference, but not surprising at all. If you lived in the United States, you wouldn't have been surprised at that at all. That's how all of his press conferences go. No matter what the subject is, the press corps in Washington, he doesn't have to let them all in. I don't know why he lets in the CNN lady. I don't know why they let them all in. But they let them all in. They all asked the same stupid questions. When is the war in Iran going to end? Why the heck would he say that? Why would he answer that? Why would he tell Iran his strategy? That'd be the dumbest thing he could do. And there they were. They were the astronauts that had circled the moon and have amazing information. What is on the dark side of the moon? I would say that would be a 1-hour press conference right there. Nobody asked.
You're right. Nobody asked. And I think the only person that needs to be blamed by this is the PR person for President Trump, who really didn't set the guidelines for what the event with the astronauts was all about. Now, getting to your question about the
by the way, let me answer that. Caroline Leavitt is his press person. There is no better press person in the world. However, she's either just had a baby or about to, so she wasn't there today.
Well, and I think whoever was filling her shoes in, or filling her shoes, pardon me, probably didn't have the best control over that situation. You know, I mean, I've dealt with a lot of PR people over the years, and being in media, and you have too, and you know as well as I do that a lot of them, when there are special events, if you try to stray from that event, they will say, no, we're not talking about that today. This is about, in this case, the astronauts, and we're celebrating their visiting of the moon, even though they didn't stop and land on the moon. So I think that's where the fault really lies.
All right, let's talk to Chuck. Chuck, you're on the other side of midnight with Dave Scott. Say hi, Chuck.
Hi. Are you aware of George Romney's sighting? He was the governor of Michigan at the time.
Governor of Michigan, George Romney, he saw a UFO. Chuck, tell us what he saw.
Yeah, it was a cigar-shaped thing. He was on a flight at the time.
Do you know about this, Dave Scott?
That one I'm not too familiar with, about the George Romney sighting.
Yeah, it would have been quite a long time ago, you know.
What's up? Wait.
I would say that one is a real one. I had a one that was real.
All right, Chuck, stop. Chuck, stop. I want to hear about yours. I don't care about George Romney. You had a sighting. Tell us exactly about your sighting. When did it happen? What happened?
Well, it happened in '66 in October. And what it was kind of a blue-green colored light that was like a laser, and it came down, and whatever it was rode down on it into a field next to where I was driving through, and just it spooked up birds and stuff, and this was at night. And you know, I would have thought that if I'd before seeing something like that I would have investigated it, but it scared the crap out of me.
Well, of course it did. Of course it did, Chuck. How do you feel about this, Dave Scott?
Well, I know that was real, and I know there was other sightings of this thing in other parts of the country that same evening.
Well, Dave Scott, how do you feel about that sighting? Does that sound real to you?
It sounds completely real to me. I've heard people seeing this blue laser, this blue light. I have seen this blue cylinder on the ground back on April 10th, 2013 or 2014, pardon me, when I had a close encounter with a UFO, and this blue cylinder probably stood 2-3 stories high. It was pretty incredible. The light of the blue was a little bit darker than the emergency police
kind of green colored. It was like you would get off of copper when you put a torch on it.
Yeah,
and that mixed with sort of like the blue that comes off of an arc, also. kind of a mixture of the two colors.
Yeah,
well, you see, you have
you
have a precise memory, and that convinces me it's true. You did see that, and it scared you, which is an appropriate response, and you have lived with it ever since. And millions of Americans, millions of people around the world have had similar experiences. Thank you for sharing yours with us, Chuck. I'm grateful
I've been made
that
aware of another one that.
That you had.
Well, I didn't have it, but it was published. It was at the assembly plant in Janesville in October.
And I bet something like that happened at WGN in Chicago. We are proud to be on WGN in Chicago.
Oh, well, anyhow, this lasted for 4 minutes, and it made the assembly line run backwards. And I'm trying to find somebody that actually saw it.
Well, I'd like to find someone who actually saw it, which, thank you for the call, Chuck. Thank you very much. It made an assembly line go backward. That's an amazing story. I've never heard that before. Have you heard it, Dave?
No, I have not heard of that happening.
I did it.
It works.
Matt, I did it. I already said we're on WGN in Chicago at exactly 30, right on the nose. Now, what was going on in the control room that this was missed? Silence. Dave Scott, what else do you have to report from Canada?
Well, I was going to give you the list of those astronauts.
Go.
All right. Well, allegedly Buzz Aldrin during the Apollo mission saw a line of 5 lights that went through. Neil Armstrong, of course, seen something. Apparently, when him and Aldrin went onto the moon and walked on the moon, they looked off into the distance and actually saw what looked to be a square box way off in the distance. And when they checked on it a little bit more after radioing it in to NASA headquarters, this box thing was gone. So the Apollo missions did have action. Shuttle commander Story Musgrave reported seeing a snake-like object in space floating around and then vanishing without any human explanation. Astronaut Leroy Chow saw 2 metallic objects flying past the International Space Station when he was stationed there. He described them as structured and not just space debris that were going on. If we get into older cases, we remember Gordon Cooper, one of the first astronauts, who claimed to have seen UFOs as a pilot and tracking them on radar. He said he watched a UFO actually land at Edwards Air Force Base that was allegedly filmed by a crew there, which means that there's actual physical evidence. He was a strong believer in UFOs and extraterrestrial life, along with Edgar Mitchell, the 6th man to walk on the moon. He never, ever saw anything while he was on the moon, but he became a big proponent in talking to politicians about UFOs and government cover-ups regarding this subject. So NASA astronauts have been very, very involved over the years of seeing and experiencing UFOs right through the entire and every shuttle and rocket mission.
Dave Scott, host of Spaced Out Radio, and spacedoutradio.com is his website. How do we find you online?
YouTube. You can find all of my shows there, youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. And we're on every major podcast network. Download us for free, including Spotify.
Dave Scott, thank you very much for being on the other side of midnight with Walter Sterling.
The playoffs are here, and you can predict the action all the way to the finals with FanDuel Predicts. Predict the spread, the total points, and even the game-winning moments that make the playoffs. Sign up and get a $25 bonus with FanDuel Predicts.
Offered by FanDuel Prediction Markets, LLC, a registered futures commission merchant. 18-plus bonus is non-withdrawable and expires 7 days after receipt. Trading derivatives involves significant risk and may not be suitable for all investors. Manage your activity with their consumer protection tools. Restrictions apply. See terms at FanDuel.com/predicts/bonus-offer-terms.